Hello and welcome to this special edition of Indianomics, which comes to you from the State Bank of India head office. State Bank, which was the main convener of this year's BanCon, the annual banking conference, where the entire industry comes together to discuss its own problems with candor and frankness. This time's BanCon was outstanding for two important reasons. One, the banking conference at no point tom-tommed its own resilience in spite of the Lehman crisis. There was a confidence that the past is past and one has to look confidently forward. That was an extremely important feature of the banking conference. The second major factor or feature of this year's banking conference was the overshadowing presence and in fact the confident presence of the public sector part of the banking industry, almost recognizing that it is our responsibility to lead this country to fuel the economy. Both positive trends. Well, so what did they discuss in terms of the challenges going forward for the public sector in particular to fuel the economy and provide the fuel for a 10% GDP growth at least? I have with me two pillars of the banking industry, Mr. O.P. Bhatt, the Chairman and Managing Director of State Bank of India and of course the main convener of this year's conference, and Mr. MV Nair, the President of the Indian Banks Association and Chairman and Managing Director of Union Bank, but as President of the IBA, he of course represents the entire banking sector. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bhatt, let me first come to you. The HR issue. Straight away, let me delve into that issue, which you all brought up very well. The number which Mr. Nair mentioned when he kicked off the conference was 58% of the top management retires in 2 years. Do you think there is going to be a crisis of talent?
In some ways, there is already a crisis of talent. What is happening in India is that you would have seen during the last 2-3 years, and we kicked it off in a very big way, a huge expansion is taking place in the banking sector, particularly in the public sector banks. Expansion is taking place in multiple modes. One is there is physical expansion, distribution, branches, ATMs, network, the whole thing is going up. But importantly, there is another expansion which is taking place is that the product and the service range of the public sector banks is actually becoming bigger, more complex and more relevant to the dynamic economy in which we are today. Now these two kinds of expansion, they both require people. The first expansion we can do with the average banker. But the second expansion may require a different kind of, more super skilled banker. The third thing that is happening is that as these two expansions take place, at the top, very top and the near top level, certain positions are required to be manned by specific types of people. It cannot be done only by seniority alone, only by experience alone. If the person doesn't have it what it takes, say to run a risk management department or to run treasury or to run IT, just because the person is senior, then you are going to position your bank for grief in the foreseeable future. So the fact that banks are feeling a scarcity of talent for these reasons is true even today. What Mr. Nair said is that if this goes on for the next 5-10 years, as I think it will go on, because India is going to grow at 8% plus. Now when that happens, it cannot happen without the banking industry being in sync with that growth requirement.
Mr. Nair, before one agrees with this is a flawless argument, but is it not true that productivity per employee, at least in the public sector space, doesn't always compare favorably with the private sector banker and even internationally? So do you think productivity is perhaps one answer, not the entire answer, but some answer at least to the HR lacuna?
No, it's very interesting. If you see at some of the numbers which was put out recently by Reserve Bank, and if you compare how the productivity has played out in last 3 years, there's a method of calculating the productivity. When it comes to public sector banks, including the sweepers, are on the rolls of the public sector banks. We add sweepers, we add peons, guards, officers, clerks, and the top management team. And then the productivity is calculated. It is not true with the private sector for the simple reason that most of them are outsourced. And even then, the increase in productivity last 4 years in public sector banks has almost, the gap has narrowed down. What it means is productivity is not an issue. But what we are really looking at now is next decade, which is substantially going to be India's decade, when the growth is going to be substantial, even if you take about 8.5%, the balance sheet size of State Bank of India, which is today, in the normal growth, without any extraordinary growth, will be 10 times what is today's size by 2020, which needs, human talent to manage it. That is the challenge that we have.
All right, I take away that issue. Now the problem remains. How has the banking sector prepared for it? At least some steps, do you think, are emerging or have been taken? I'm referring to the lacuna, sir. You admitted that, in terms of numbers, there is a gap.
I'll intervene for a minute. Yeah. The first major decision taken is few years back when the autonomy package was given to the public sector banks, where HR side substantial autonomy has come in.
You were able to attract good talent in treasury, risk management.
There is a board-led HR policies. We can, come in with the performance-related incentive. We can recruit from the market. But the gap that was coming was the compensation package that we give, whether it is comparable. We have done some work on this. When we compare up to scale 3, that is senior manager level, we are better than the lowest, but it is slightly worse than the mean. So whenever we advertise, we do get 100 applications for one vacancy. So what it means is the ability to attract at that level is good. But as Mr. Bhatt rightly put it, there are specialized skills where the compensation package doesn't meet. There are senior levels the compensation package doesn't meet. While we have an authority where we can, laterally we can recruit, but our ability to recruit was in question. Now, but at the same time, wage negotiation takes place industry wide.
Yes.
This time in the wage negotiation, if you see the package the way it has come, if you compare with what is happening in the industry, we have substantially increased the, in 17.5% is quite good compared to the, last year's economic development.
Sir, my point is, the central problem or the central difference is the gradient is not very steep. You recruit at a very comparable level. It's a very competitive level, in fact, better than private sector. But the gradient is not steep. Now, here you could face with probably union-related problems. I do not know.
That's what I'm saying.
The law is not helping you because...
In other circumstances, two sets of things we are doing. One is to use the government dispensation to the best possible. There are some difficulties which I'll come to. The other is that what we can do in any case, what we think is right, because the hole that is going to come up there has to be filled up by existing people.
Yes.
So before the hole comes up, if these existing people can be upskilled and made into better managers and better leaders, maybe they will be able to pick up the slack. So that is an attempt. Where we are not succeeding fully in the government dispensation is, there is a psychological issue. One is that if I were to pay $100 salary and a private or a foreign sector bank were also to pay $100 salary, chances are that the applicant would move to the foreign bank rather than to the public sector bank. That is one challenge that we face. As it is to raise salaries to that level is difficult, to raise it beyond that is even more difficult. That is one set of challenge. The other set of challenge is that we've tried it. We've recruited people from outside. At senior levels, what is that, it's like it happens in transplant. The organism rejects the transplant.
Okay.
We have experienced that.
To me, it does seem that you are stretching your best under the circumstances with creative solutions, but these still look like living in oxygen, considering the challenges you will face. We'll take a break on that, but this is not the only challenge they face. The bigger challenge is that of capital. After a very short break, we'll come and discuss that with these two stalwarts of the banking industry in a minute from now.